Hello, hello. Welcome to a virtual book club. The book club you can attend even if you didn't read the book, but most of us have read the book this time. Virtual book club started in October of 2020 during the global pandemic. I'm Benita Lee, and I'm joined by different guests, sometimes all over the world. We meet to discuss books, connect with others, or share thoughts and tell stories on the themes that we're reading on. Don't forget to say hi or tell us where you're tuning in from if you're in the audience. Today, we are joined by the author of the book we're reading, Michael Woudenberg. Usually, we read business books, leadership books, self development, but the book Paradox is more than a science fiction. It's based on science fact. And I myself am learning so much on the topics of AI, morality, humanity, and even ethics. So I am going to introduce the author to you, and then I'll bring on the guests. Sorry, my controls aren't working very well.
That's fine. get used to you get used to all the digital gremlins when you've been working post COVID for as long as we have.
Yeah, like I'm a little bit I'm a little bit of a cynic on robots taking over, Michael, when they can't even, this app can't even get my lips and my voice to match. So,
I was noticing that too. I was like, oh, we look like a dubbed Chinese kung fu movie from the 80s. No, that's actually kind of the funniest. I've worked in advanced technology for so many years, and it's always been this. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay, now let's talk about this really crazy algorithm that's going to do. And you're like, I can't even get my Telcon to work right. What are we doing here?
and that's exactly it. It's ridiculous. So, this book club has been going on since the pandemic. Michael, I was in Houston at the time. I brought it to Duluth. At one point, we read The Fifth Discipline
Mhm.
as suggested by CJ Eunice. And oh man, we've read so many books. This is the first time we're reading a science fiction. But, when I caught wind of it from your posts and, through my good friend Chris Postel and Peter and the gang, I thought, wow, this talks about like real life, like all the struggles that we're dealing with around AI and technology in real life. So I was like, oh man, yeah, we got to read this. And so it's the first science fiction book that we've read so far.
Cool.
And we're hoping to read the sequel. So I'm going to introduce you to the members of the book club.
Perfect.
Um, I'm going to bring Rob Berry to the stage. Rob's one of the OGs of the virtual book club. Hal Garin, Avel Beckford, coming to you from the T dot. We have, and from Spain, we have Ferenc.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
So Benita, you said read as in past tense, and I unless you're further along than most of us, I think reading would be a better term to use. I think people are anywhere from maybe chapters 4 through chapter 15 or 16 or somewhere in between.
Yes. Yeah, a good thing to point out, Hal. We won't want to have any spoilers, but we have Michael with us today, so let's capitalize on the time that we have with the author. Okay, I've been following Michael's posts since the book launch. When did the book launch, Michael?
I did my soft launch back in July, and it was getting ready to go on a long road trip. So I decided to kick it out there and start getting some feedback. So I would say my hard launch was actually just this week. That's where I really kind of hit the promotion and getting it out there to kind of boost the sales numbers up. So my hard launch actually started on Cyber Monday, which is apropos to an AI apocalypse on Cyber Monday. I figured nice little connection there. So hard launch this week, but we've been going through and getting feedback and everything for the last couple of months.
So if you're somewhere before chapter maybe 12 or 13, you just got a spoiler. I think the apocalypse starts around midway through the book.
It definitely ramps up after chapter 12.
Sure. I have a question. So
yes.
Just for context, I was summarizing books and articles for a professor in the Netherlands, and the one article I summarized was, "Is today's science fiction tomorrow's science fact?" Now, the question I want to ask you, how did you come up with the idea for Paradox?
It's a great question. So it actually didn't come from, necessarily the hard science side of the house. I was part of a group, a Facebook group. They had a podcast for a while and everything else called Mixed Mental Arts. You can still find their podcasts on different places. And it was a great concept, great idea, and I love the name, Mixing Mental Arts. And so the idea, one of their taglines was grappling with the complex problems of life. So different topics like, are we emotional or rational, or maybe how rational are we when it comes down to it? Most of you have gotten through chapter 5, which is the topic of kintsugi. Kintsugi is a Japanese art where you take something that's broken and you mend it and you can make it better. But then kintsugi applied to our relationships. How can you take a relationship that feels broken and realize that it can be broken, but it can actually also, through that break, be made more beautiful in the end, if we approach it from the psychological perspective a little differently. So a lot of the topics actually originated there. So in 2018, I was on a hike with my cousin and a friend just south of here in Tucson. We do a weekend guys night hike up a mountain and then camp out up there. But on the way up, I was kind of formulating this idea. How do I take these topics of the psychology and sociology and all these different things and weave it into a way that's more compelling than a lot of the dry books that you might read on the topic, right? And so I was like, okay, AI, humanist versus a AI or technologist versus a humanist mindset. And so I kind of put the book arc and all the different things together. And then I sat on it until GPT came out this last year. And I was like, I should probably write this book. And so in the intervening years, I actually got a lot more involved in AI, a lot more involved in the technologies that make it occur. And so then it became an exploration of what would it take to get AI into this AGI that everyone's fearing, and what would it take, and what does that mean from a human perspective? And what I found was this great opportunity to both kind of ground us in where we're at in the technology, but also help us understand where we're at in the psychology.
That's cool.
Hey, Chris.
Chris Postel just joined us.
So, Mike,
Hey,
I'm
everyone.
curious
Thanks for
how
having me.
much
Sorry I'm
of
late.
it was, how much of the book was sort of firsthand knowledge, and how much did you need to research? And then, once you put yourself out there as an author, then everybody who thinks they know something about the topic will want to critique it. So then you get into what you think you know, but I still
Right.
needed to research it anyway to be sure I knew it.
So Benita has mentioned the essays that she follows, which are also record into voiceovers for a podcast, or you can get them on podcast players. It's called Polymathic Being. You can find it at www.polymathicbeing.com. All right. That said, a polymath is a jack of all trades and master of none, but more often better than a master of one. So I'm not the type of character who is like just immersed in AI and then tried to break out and had to study. I've dabbled, like if you were to look at the different titles on the bookshelf behind me, hundreds of different titles of hundreds of different topics, trying to weave them together into something a little bit more unique. So Polymathic Being tries to uncover counterintuitive insights across domains and disciplines. So a lot of it was kind of, I already had all these threads on my fingers and then trying to figure out how to weave them together. However, what you'll notice, so how far are you guys to like chapter 6? Who's not to chapter 6 yet? Anybody? Okay, I'm just trying to baseline. Okay, so chapter 3 on can AI be, or almost intelligent, and about can AI be creative and what layers of AI and everything else. Those were actually explored in my nonfiction writing on Polymathic Being this last year. So I kind of capture these ideas and get the nonfiction factual layers and everything else, and then I can draw in and weave the narrative around that. So for example, chapter 4 on biasing bias, that whole lecture where Kira's in her master's program and the professor Fitzsimmons is going through the lecture, that lecture is actually one of my essays. I couldn't actually change the tone of it properly to make it into a good narrative. I'm like, this sounds too much like a lecture. So I'm like, okay, Kira's in college, it's a lecture. and so weaving those different things in, like the ethics and different things like that, we've explored these in the nonfiction and then woven them back in around the fictional narrative to kind of move the progress forward.
That's a good point, because as I was reading it, I kept saying to myself, this seems real. Like some of the outside of the fighting and the stabbing and the blood and all that good stuff, the concepts behind it seem real and they seem plausible. Even the part about her being in college, I was kind of curious as to how she ended up there and in the midst of all this other stuff, but that actually makes a whole lot of sense now. Oh, wow.
Well, the other stuff hasn't quite gotten chaotic yet, right? They're still exploring because, creating an AGI, as I was writing the book, is, it's shockingly complex. I think, Chris, you were mentioning to me once on the side about the psychobiotics. You guys remember that element of gut health versus brain health?
Yeah.
So yeah, the ability to, our memories are actually, even our entire cognition is actually influenced by our stomach. How we remember something is directly influenced by the hormonal systems that exist. So if you change those hormones, you can actually change the way we perceive the world. And so truly in today's society, our diets are almost too clean. And that's actually creating anxiety because the gut is out of kilter and is sending warning signals to the brain, which we live in a pretty comfortable and pretty safe world. And when your gut is sending these signals and everything looks great around it, it's really kind of your brain can't quite compute that. So that's just another challenge to actually achieve AGI or specifically a human matched AGI, if you will. But I really want to hear from you guys. I want to hear where are you at? What kind of big questions do you have? What are your thoughts on it?
Well, my thought is, like, I guess I'm reading it in conjunction with listening to the podcast, so I feel like I'm getting like a deeper level. But just for the ones of us that don't know out there, like I'm kind of one of those idiots that are like, what are they talking about when they're like AGI, like that next level of AI, like what are they saying? Like, what do they mean out there in like the headlines and stuff like that? This book is helping me to kind of understand the headlines.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
No,
think
that's
one of the perspectives that comes to mind as you say that is, the people that, basically people when they're viewing AI in their understanding of it, and it may be very limited for a lot of people because they're just reacting to what they think they know or what is being presented. You basically have the camps of optimists and pessimists. And then somewhere in there, the pragmatists are probably seeing, both the upside and the downside risks. But what the book is doing for me is, and I might be further along than most, so I won't do, I'll avoid spoilers. I just finished chapter 15 this morning.
Oh, wow, cool.
Yeah, but it is demonstrating, an accelerated significant risk, the downside that I don't even think enough of the armchair experts on the subject have really thought all the way through.
No.
It's the when do we cross the threshold where we can't control it? It's beyond, when it becomes beyond the threshold of, we can talk regulation all you want. That's all interesting for 2023.
Right.
But is it 2025, 2030? I don't know. But, there's a trajectory to this that we as humans are at great risk of losing control.
And I think it's interesting you brought up the the optimist versus the doomsayer, because chapter 15 is entitled False Binary. And it is the problem is you have that bifurcation of it's either going to kill us or whatever. And in the middle gets lost that nuance. And that nuance in the middle is actually where effective regulation and management is going to happen. So like LinkedIn right now is just driving me bonkers. I just published an essay the other week. It's entitled, I Hate AI. And why would a guy who wrote a book about AI and is immersed in helping people develop AI hate AI? Because I hate the way people are reacting to it. I hate the way that, false binary actually kind of captures that. You've got on the one side people that are in a dead panic will do anything to stop it. On the other side, you got people who are just willy-nilly developing it without any consideration or care. And I think that was a lot of what this book was trying to address was, I want people to, finish this book and not be absolutely convinced of which side they would pick.
And I think, a nuance to the current events of, the OpenAI governance saga, is, I think a missed element is really what we'll never fully know. And that was the heart of the disagreement between the philosophy of the board, where Altman wanted to take the, or was taking OpenAI, and the fact that they felt arguably that he wasn't being fully transparent to them and candid, because they were coming from we need to slow down, we need to manage the risk, we need to do things responsibly, and I think that nuance is all missed in the saga that played out.
It definitely is missed in that one. And I actually have a post coming out on LinkedIn next week, kind of taking another poster's comments to task, because he's like, you have the doers and the talkers, and Altman just demonstrates how amazing the doers were. He won. I'm like, whoa. He just did a coup d'etat on his board, eliminating the non-for-profit board that was driven to do ethical and safe AI development. He got rid of it. He filled the board now with tech bros who are focused on profitability. like that's a huge red flag for me. It's not. I don't think that is responsible AI development anymore. Back to your point, Hal.
And I think, and we don't need to make this about the OpenAI saga, but just to take that one more step, I think the winner in all of that is Microsoft. Because as opposed to
100%.
bringing OpenAI basically into their company and absorbing the risk, they can continue to act as a competitor. They now took a board seat, a non-voting board seat. So they're basically an observer in the boardroom. So they take no real liability as a board member for whatever OpenAI does. Yet they have full privy to what it's doing.
Yep.
And they're, 49% or whatever, investor. I don't know what it works out to mathematically. Not only did Altman win, but Microsoft won.
100% on that one. And I didn't, in the book, I didn't actually talk about like corporatism, the companies driving it. Truly, in a large way, you've got, the two major groups are Gaia Innovations, who is trying to, this is Kira and her father Jasper are trying to get their mother animated, right? So they've captured what they think is her consciousness, and they're trying to figure out how to make it into an AGI, animate her, bring her back to life, if you will. And they're a research organization. I think their intentions, I believe, are good. They're not trying to go after the corporate dollars or anything else. And then the PG Collective is the one that's kind of, they're trying to do ethical AI development. They're trying to figure out how to counter bad AI and things of that nature. And so they're also well-intended in this one. And the irony is, even amongst the well-intended, like I didn't want to get into the politics of corporatism or the capitalist or the profit-driven or anything else. That actually doesn't really make a play in this book at all. And that's a whole other element on there, because in a large way, you didn't even need that element to have things still be challenging.
What a great point. Welcome, Aura. Aura is coming to it from California, I think. Is that right, Aura?
Yeah, absolutely. California. I'm right now in Playa Vista in the office. So I had to find a little cubicle to
So either you're in the same room as Avril, or
I noticed,
or it's the same background, or something's just you're messing with my head here.
Yeah.
Glitch in the Matrix.
So I have a comment. So when I read books, I don't read them in a vacuum. I often read them in relationship to somewhat a book I read. So as I was reading this, I was thinking about a book I read in 2016. It's not about AI, but it's about technology and ethics. And one of the things I liked about your book was that you delved deeper into the whole ethics piece.
Well, I appreciate it. Do you have a specific, like, what about that? What was something that came out on that one? I'm actually kind of curious. What the connection that you made there?
Well, talking about the implications. So with the other book, Game Changer by, I think, Douglas Richards, the technology is that, and they claim that it's close because Elon Musk was doing something. It's being able to download years and years of information into your brain in a few hours.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the ethics behind that was they were only giving access to that technology to people who are already brilliant, like the Albert Einstein.
Yep.
So then, obviously, that is ethically wrong because some of the other people, like ordinary people, need it more. So, like in the class, when they were talking about all this stuff, and the students were responding I thought that was really good because it made you think, because it seemed so realistic. And then you could actually situate yourself into the conversation as a character and not just passively reading. Does that make sense?
Oh, that's really good to hear. No, that's good. Yes. No, that's awesome to hear on that one. And it's and that's kind of in a way like we all need to be. I think a lot of books, you read the things, it's like, okay, I'm glad that it was an active engagement on that one. And that's kind of the goal in a way.
I think related to that, the way, and I don't want to give away what happens to them as people are reading through the book, and I've still got, more than a third to go myself, but the interplay of the relationships and the complexity of what happens between the mother, the father, Kira, and Noah, where their storylines, how they intersect, how they diverge and intersect, was pretty masterful, quite frankly. I always look at the way books are written and go, boy, I could have maybe articulated the nugget, but I couldn't have woven a story around it that held together, because I'd want to get to the heart of the story I want to tell.
Yeah. Well, so I'm going to be completely honest. Like, I couldn't have designed that beforehand had I tried. And so there is an adage. As I sat down to read, I heard this adage. I for the love of all things holy, I can't find it again because I would love to give good credit. So it's not mine, but if no one else wants to claim it, I'll claim it. It was, good writing should surprise the author. And I will tell you, as I was writing it, as you get into the chapter, let me double check on which one it is. So I don't want to give spoilers on this one. Chapter 10. So chapter 10 was a surprise. I'm sorry, not chapter 10. You guys might actually be closer. Chapter 10 was also a surprise, but in a different way. Bear with me. Yeah, I think chapter 7, where the relationship that Kira and Noah, how that wove back together. That is not how I actually originally identified how the AI would actually become animated. But as I played with it, it was like, it just naturally kind of flowed that way. And it was like, at a certain point in time, I'm like, it has to be this way. And it worked out really well in kind of a surprising way for how Mother becomes animated in her initial instantiation. So I can't claim that I had this masterful weave as it went, but as the narrative went, it was that keeping flexible with it and kind of letting it ebb and flow.
That's neat. Yeah. When I read that part and the book talks about perspectives and linear thinking versus systems thinking and vice versa, I was like, yeah, you always need more than one person to solve any problem. You know what I don't...
Benita, you got the... Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to say, you also got a preview on that in that petroleum conference where you were,
I did.
You heard the introduction to systems thinking there.
I did. And Ender's Game. So now I have Ender's Game on my reading list. So yeah, I want to thank you because I don't think I've read sci-fi since I was in high school, and I think I'm getting back into it as a result of reading Paradox. So thank you.
Benita, on a side note, I'll give you the link to my review on Ender's Game. It's
awesome.
At least 5 years old or something, maybe longer. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you, Avel.
Yeah, so for those who haven't quite gotten to that part, or it's not a spoiler in any way, or the people listening in, Ender's Game, there's a phrase in there that I found to be somewhat revolutionary in my thinking. Specifically, it goes all the way back to when I was a I think I read this in college as a cadet getting ready to go in the Army. And it was in the story, there's this battle lab where they're practicing for combat in space. And so the battle lab is actually in 0 Gs. So there's no up, down, left, or right. It's just no gravity. But when they enter the battle lab, they enter from a gravitational field, which biases your perspective as if you were fighting across the objective. And Ender merely said, what if we reconceptualize it so that we fall towards the enemy's gate? How would we fight the battle differently? And that's been something I've played with for years, even all the way back. I think it's probably some of my military stories are woven into the book as well. But the idea of like an IED in Iraq, where everyone was freaking out about this new thing. And so what they did is they tried to create technological solutions for this new thing. And instead, if you actually rotated the problem and looked at it differently, you say it's a mass casualty effector from a classic ambush. It was a tactical problem, not a technology problem. And so we kept putting more and more technology on the vehicles and driving into ambushes, versus actually realizing the tactics don't drive into the ambush that you didn't need the technology to overcome. And so that sort of reframing is incredibly powerful. And that's kind of one of the things that, Noah specifically, that's kind of his thing. He's the former Army Ranger. I wonder where he got that. But reframing those perspectives.
Not to change the topic, but I do want to step back for a second. I got a question for you, Mike. We mentioned that you surprised yourself while you're writing a couple chapters, and while you were producing all the work there, did you find that at any point when you surprised yourself, did you go back and adjust some of the plot from an earlier point in the story because it kind of changed your way of thinking, how you wanted to approach it?
Yeah, definitely. There's one. We were kind of getting towards the end of the book, and I'm trying to figure out how do I bring it to the climax and the catastrophe in a logical way. And I end up having to go back, and that's where I end up writing chapters 11 and 12. I was probably effectively in like 18, 19, but I had to go back and write 11 and 12 to insert. And it actually, I found it to be a powerful insert because it actually provided a really good view for what the AI could do for good for humanity, but at the same time setting up the stage for the logical calamity.
Yeah, I with where I am in the book, that's one of the things that's been nagging at me is how are you going to wrap this up? How are you going to bring it to a conclusion? Because it just keeps amping up where I am, with no obvious conclusion in sight. So it's a big curiosity. So I'm looking forward to it. One of the things I do see playing out over and over in the book, and it probably when you think about it in real life, especially as it relates to AI as it is being developed now, is this concept of the law of unintended consequences. And it seems like that keeps playing out, regardless of what someone is trying to accomplish. Mm-hmm. It ends up being something different and almost completely opposite to what they had anticipated their act was going to do. And when I try to play out, the trajectory, that we are on with AI in rapid development, both by good actors for the most part now, and probably more nefarious actors in the not too distant future, that concept of unintended consequences. What I meant was this.
Well, and that's where
and something else completely happened.
Well, that's a lot of the. God, that's an interesting. So this goes into. There's a bunch of different kind of threads to pull on that one. Goes back to kind of what Avil was saying about the ethics and things like that, right? And I think what we need to be able to do is, be honest about here's what I want to do. Here's how it could be used badly. I'm creating an image generator. It's great for X. Like I used an image generator with a friend of mine, and that's kind of where we got the cover images, right? So it allowed me to do art that I'm not really capable of, just drawing out of myself, and it looks really good and it's fun because the book about AI and it uses some of the capabilities. However, that same art generator can be used to produce inaccurate or malicious type content. And so being able to look at not even you cannot always intend that your outcome will always be good, because someone can always take that and use it for bad. Like a hammer is a great tool. I can pound nails and build a house, or I could whack you over the head with it, right? There is no ability to actually control the actual nefarious actions. So you have to name them and identify them and start to put controls in place around them. But you have to be honest about them.
I like that.
And Michael, how do you see, and everyone else can chip in as well, obviously, but how do you see the governance of this AI development will be handled in the next year? Do you see global collaboration between institutes that creates a useful framework that actually protects users? Or do you see something similar that we, for example, in Europe had with the GDPR, when everyone went crazy about protecting people's privacy, but we ended up scrolling 15 minutes on website asking us if we want to accept the cookies? So what direction do you foresee there?
And everyone accepts the cookies anyway. I don't have, I honestly, it's something that I struggle with as well, is the people making so let me just talk about what I think the problem with the regulation is now. The people making the regulation now don't understand the technology and don't understand the human psychology, right? So right now, there is nothing that's going to be done that will do more than probably, I mean, you look at, there's a term called regulation lock, I think it's called, where, the second Sam Altman releases ChatGPT-4, he runs up to Congress and says, we must regulate everybody else. Not OpenAI, clearly, not OpenAI, but everybody else. He wants to draw a line and stop anybody else from getting it. And it's like, okay, that's regulatory lock. That's where companies are blocking. So that's the biggest issue I see is, number one, we don't understand the technology. Number two, we don't understand the psychology. And number three, we're being manipulated by economic interests that aren't giving us the full story. So I don't have a lot of faith that we're going to be able to regulate it well. And so, yeah, that's probably not the answer you want.
No, I'll draw a really bad analogy here, but it's the best I can do in the moment. And it's bad, so bear with me. But it's like committing murder. We can create all the regulation and legislation and all of the penalties for having committed the act, but we can't stop it from happening per se.
Right.
And so I don't see how we regulate. If we regulate the generally good actors who are applying ethics, we're basically putting handcuffs on people from doing the things that they would have done ethically anyway.
So, and I think so. I'm sorry.
No, I mean just to complete the thought. So if we regulate or we try to prevent the consequences, the negative consequences, the act has already occurred. The murder has already occurred. Now we're just trying to figure out how we're going to penalize the bad actor.
Right. Anita, is your mic the one creating the echo on that one?
It was something.
I don't know. I'm gonna go mute.
So, Hal, you have great points on that one. So, I think the answer, and it's you're not going to regulate, but you can educate. And fundamentally, I think that's where I was going with this is I don't have a good answer. Like I want people to leave reading this book and not be sure which side they'd pick, because I think that's a problem in its own right. I want people to leave and be like, holy crap, I learned a lot about AI and I learned a lot about my own humanity. And now I have a better foundation on which to kind of judge what's going to happen. I mean, like you use the example of murder. Great. Like, how do we educate people that there's other options other than murder to resolve your conflict or something like that, right? So yeah, I think it's more about education than regulation. And an example I have is there's this guy I'm friends with on Facebook. He is always freaking out about AI doing bad things, and he's the first one to repost clearly AI generated content that confirms his own biases. And so I'm just like, I want to be like, dude, that's AI generated. You're afraid of yourself. That's what's going on. You're afraid of, you're not able to handle this right yet. And I think that's where I'm hoping this book kind of comes through, where people can have a better foundation on which to understand themselves and how they're reacting.
Well, I think an example of where something's going to play out very shortly is deep fakes and the U.S. election. Mm-hmm. And there's no question that we don't know, but there's no question that it's likely to happen that ad campaigns will be done by PACs that are not necessarily fully supported by or endorsed by the candidates who are the likely finalists. But it will become very tangible to a large group of people that what you see you can't trust anymore. What you hear, you can't trust anymore. But what do? You can't prevent it. So you can only penalize the action. Well, the damage is already done.
So, I mean, here on a positive side, it's not that politicians have really endeared themselves as trustworthy over the last 20 years. So it's not like we have a far fall into generative AI at this point in time.
True. Why that example's top of mind is I was watching an Axios conference that was done yesterday or day before. I was watching it live, and one of the segments was one of the Axios reporters was interviewing Senator Amy Klobuchar from Minnesota. Mm-hmm. One of the more rational, logical, probably at least reasonably in step contemporary thinkers on some of the topics of the day, for a politician at least. And she was talking about the concern about deep fakes and the impact on the impending election. So in one respect, I think she's very much right, but she's also talking about the need to regulate it.
Right.
And so, even someone who is more astute than the average politician, using my own opinion there, she's staring at what's right in front of her.
Right.
As opposed to really thinking deeply about that's just a minor manifestation of all of the sundry risks that regulation or legislation really can't do anything about.
And that's and that's again, I think it's less about regulation and more about education. The regulation of ignorance is never going to succeed.
So now, Michael, you said something earlier that got me to thinking. You said that your overall outcome is for people to come out of the book feeling neutral. And I'm summarizing, so correct me if I get it wrong. Now, I have an opinion, and I know as I read the book, I think what I'm reading is kind of solidifying my opinion. So have you thought about, and let me just say, I'm very pro AI with limits, right? So I'll say that. But everything that I've thought about, hey, it taking over, we remember Skynet from when we were kids. So how do you think you'll be able to craft it? Because I see there's a part 1 and a part 2. How do you think you'll be able to craft it to where people will come out feeling educated versus feeling skewed towards one side or the other? I guess that was a long way of asking that question, but that's my general
So I want
question.
to let me ask you a question quick. What chapter are you on right now?
I'm only on 4 or maybe 5, so I'm not that far.
So I think so right now it's just setting the foundation of where we're at with AI and what we can go do. So and when I mean you use the word neutral, I would just say unsure, right? To be able to see where it could go or where on either way, and not quite be sure. Like even I wrote the book, I'm not quite sure. Like if you were going to pin me to an answer, I don't know that I would have a good one right now. Like would I follow the more humanist side or the more the technologist side? I there's good arguments on both. Now, I want to step back. I would probably just avoid the question, be like, I would rather not get to the point of a binary problem anyway. Like that's where I'm at right now. But I think I'd be curious, like as we move forward to these book club days and you get further in the book, I'd be curious how your perception adapts or doesn't, and why. Fundamentally what I'm hoping for is people aren't just like absolutely not or absolutely yes, that people would have, even if they're weighted towards one side, could also understand enough to reach to the other side and hopefully avoid the apocalypse.
Yeah, and I think that would be the best hope. But you know how we are as humans. We oftentimes look for information that confirms what we already believe.
Confirmation bias.
So yeah, absolutely. So I'm just wondering about that. I think that's going to be very interesting because from what I can tell so far, I can see the attempt to have balance within the characters. You can see their internal conflicts, and you see that already. So I'm interested to see how it really plays out, especially for everyone else who's so much further along than me. You've probably already seen that.
So I do want to ask, a little bit more on that psychology. We haven't heard from Frank and Aurora. I hope we got your name right on that one. Or Evil too much. What were some things that you've learned so far that have kind of been something new that you haven't really thought about before?
So I haven't started yet. Today marks the first day that I'm going to start reading the book. So I'm learning everything new right now.
Hopefully no spoilers.
Yes.
So I'm in chapter 6 right now. So far I haven't read anything that was, all the facts that you wrote here that's something I know because I'm interested in the topic. What was new for me is the concept of viewing the same thing from different angles, trying not too crazy about either side, trying not to get too technologist or too excited about the human part, trying to explain the good and the bad of both, because there is plenty. The only thing is that it's so difficult today to have normal conversations with people who you don't agree with. So if you go to LinkedIn, you will see artists that are super chill and painting and get angry when something electronic gets in their 10 square meter area. Or you will meet people programming AIs and shouting with artists, stating they never created anything useful for humanity. So it's just the end of the spectrum, and it's not useful. So what this book hopefully helps is to start the conversation between these two sides.
Actually, I wrote an essay. You literally just described an essay I wrote about to almost that degree of the artists versus the software people. It was hilarious. It is so true, because that's a lot of it is just like hoping to have people, have those conversations. You're absolutely right. I like that. I'll drop it in here.
For me, I'm only at chapter 4. I read books pretty quickly, but this one I take a break because I have to think about it, go read something else. Like for me, I tend to embrace technology and I write about stuff. I said any technology can be a double-edged sword. You have good and bad. You know, people talk about you lose jobs because of technology. Well, they're going to create new jobs. So when I was reading the book, right, I'm thinking, okay, this is kind of neat. And it triggers a lot of thought for me, how they want to save the memories. And I'm thinking that could be the good, that could be bizarre. So I read books differently from other people. So I deconstruct them differently. And I'm thinking about ramifications and stuff like that. So that's my 2
All right,
cents.
no, that's cool. I like that.
Yeah, I think to me, the thing of, when will we? It's out there. It's just a matter of when. When will we cross the barrier where we can't control the technology we've created? Right now, we feel like we can control it. And there is some point, there is some point in time, whether it's in our lifetimes or not, where, and will we get to the point where we trust the technology enough where complacency sets in until we realize we've lost control and then we can't reel it back in. And,
So there's
and I've gotten to the point of the book where that has gotten me thinking a lot more deeply about that.
So that's an interesting one, mostly because, in a way, who lost control? The humans in the book, and maybe this is kind of my read on a little bit. Maybe I don't want to bias too hard. Is humans lost control of themselves, not the AI. And I think that's what I worry about the most. I mean, if we build the AI right and intelligently, there's no reason why it should want to break control from us. The bigger challenge is when we lose control of ourselves. And I think that's what I worry about the most. I think most of you are to the point where we've talked about anthropomorphizing AI. And that's something, that's a loss of control that humans have of themselves. When you read into AI human behaviors like ChatGPT, so a great example is the person that came out a few months ago and said, ChatGPT fell in love with me. He didn't lose control of the AI. He lost control of his own cognition. Because when you actually did a linguistic analysis of the responses that ChatGPT was coming up with, you found out that, oh, by the way, in its either training data or available data, it had scraped all of these emails of the Russian bride scams. So he was acting a persona that ChatGPT connected to a dupe on Russian bride scams. So the AI didn't fall in love with him. This guy was just acting as if he were the target of a Russian bride scam. And so the AI responded statistically, predictively of what the next response should be. And it's the same thing as this scam. And so we didn't lose control of the AI. He lost control of himself.
There's I know, Benita, I know we're coming up on the end of our hour, but there's, if you haven't seen this, I'll have to go find the name of the episode. There's an old Star Trek episode from the original series in the 60s where Kirk and the crew land on this planet and two planets are at war with each other. And the war is all simulation exercises run by computers that decide who is going to die.
And then the people get their card and they walk.
You were lost in the battle, Michael. So you have to go to the vaporization chamber.
Yep, I remember that
everybody
episode.
just complies.
Yeah.
And, rational human beings look at this and go, that is nonsensical. You don't even know what you're worrying about anymore. And they try to put an end to it. And it was it's not realistic per se, but, it was a view back in the 60s of technology making decisions that are logical on their face, but has nothing to do with humanity.
I would still actually make that argument that the humans created it and then accepted it and then lost control of themselves. They all just accepted it because nothing stopped them. The second in that episode, when they turned off the technology didn't fight back per se, or the humans the humans had enough control to turn it off in the end. But they accepted it. They lost control of themselves. I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying, as you and Hal are talking, I'm reminded of iRobot, where they have those 3 rules. Do you think something like that will happen with AI?
So I play on that. I take the 3 rules for robots, kind of from iRobot concept.
Okay.
It's in the book. You'll kind of see a little bit. It actually, in the chapter Mama Bear, I believe you see that kind of paradigm exist. I think it can legitimately. There are quandaries. There are go back to ethics that you brought up earlier, Aviel, and that's there are ethical quandaries. The trolley car problem, is just careening down the tracks in a lot of ways, and there's never really perfectly good ideas or answers.
Benita here. I'm frozen, but can you hear me?
Yes, I was wondering. You are holding you're like a wax figure master over there.
Yeah, no kidding. So I am I guess I'm very impressionable. So as I go through this book, I jump back and forth because I'm like, yeah, Noah, good on you. Because there was the time when I was like, I didn't do anything with my phone. I didn't, the way that I am now, I do everything with my phone. But back then, I didn't do anything with my phone. And I wasn't one of those people that checked my phone while I'm with people. I really concentrate on my interactions with people. So I really resonate with Noah, and then I really resonate with Kira too, because I'm like, oh man, I wish I got into this kind of stuff young, and then maybe I could be a difference maker in the ethics and the morality behind it and the regulations, right, and compliance, because that's my thing, right? So this book is really got me up and down, and next week, or not next week, but December 14th and December 28th, I think we're going to concentrate on the actual examples from the book and focus on those, and then ask you what the process was behind it. I really want to talk about the gardeners, and very subtle, but wow, the meaning behind every time the gardeners are mentioned, I was like, wow, that's good. That's subtle. That's good. So why don't we do that? I don't know if we're going to have you for the 14th and the 28th of December, but
I'm scheduled for both.
Michael, okay, I would love it, because I really want to ask you about the fact that you used ChatGPT yourself to co-write the book, as you say. And
yeah,
well, you kind of said it playfully, but I want you to explain what you meant by that. And then I also want to I want to ask, how did you write from a female perspective? Because Kira is female, Noah is male, and Mother is female. So that was really interesting to me, because they all seem like authentic characters that were unique. So more to come on Paradox, people, and more of this great conversation, more focused on what we're reading. So if you haven't started, you need to break into your book today. And I promise you, no, I'm not singling you out, Aura, but I know you're going to love the book. I just know you will. And I know you'll just, I think you're going to relate to Kira. I don't know why, but I don't know. I just think this. And then, so on December 14th, we'll talk about, the first half of the book. And then for December 28th, we'll talk about the ending. Don't forget, this week is the hard launch of the book. So get it on the Cyber Monday, Cyber Week sale. Go to Michael Woudenberg's profile if you haven't already. I think I've shared it on my own as well. I'll try to get the link up on my post and the event for next week, or for December 14th. And listen to Polymathic Being podcast if you haven't, because it really gives you like a, I don't know, it gives you like a deeper connection to the book and to the ideas that surround it. So that's it. An hour really goes by fast, We have so many more questions for you, Michael. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Thank you, other members. Any last thoughts? And we're gonna sign off and end this stream. We're gonna stay in the studio for a few moments today, just to get some feedback on how we think it went. To you audience members, we will see you back here on December 14th.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Benita, for organizing it.